what I'm calling a special holiday bonus episode. Um, here
I love
of
it.
all questions considered. You and I have had a lot of changes going on. Plus, it's holidays and all that kind of stuff. So, we had a pretty solid like 15 weeks of this new thing this
Yeah.
year. And then now all kinds of other things. I'll share part of my news and transition. So you'll notice like we've got like the restream branding and all this kind of stuff. I actually took a new call. So I'm still a pastor in the ELCA, but just this is my first week as a pastor at Christ Lutheran Church in Georgetown, Texas. So still in the greater Austin area. And really excited and grateful for new beginnings. And so I know we're going to talk about some gratitude and things, but then I also know you and I have like some logistical stuff to work out thanks to some of this transition, but then it's also holidays and things. So I was just gonna let those folks know that do tune in and listen along with us and things that we appreciate you. We're grateful for you. We'll talk more about that today, but also we're probably not going to be like on a weekly basis here for the next little bit. We're going to take this time not only to figure out some of those logistics, but figure out kind of what's next, recuperate. How do we bring more people into the conversation? How do we best get your questions so that they can be considered? Who else do you want to see considering some questions along with us? All that good stuff as we roll into a new year. So for now, a holiday bonus episode called "Why Should I Give Thanks?"
I love it. I love all the considering. Who else should consider? What are the new questions we should consider? I don't think there's any other show, any other place where the value that's offered is just the considering of the questions.
That's right. We're
We're
just
not
gonna
going to
like
answer.
lay it out there, you know.
Yeah, it's so good. But gosh, I really love and miss this time and this space that we make here. And so I felt that the past few weeks, and I'll feel it the next few weeks as we take a little break for the holidays. But I'm glad we're back for what is it? Holiday bonus edition
That's right.
on gratitude and giving thanks. So I'm grateful to have this bonus episode.
All right. Well, we got any questions we can consider about
We do.
gratitude?
We've yeah. Well, here's the first question for us to consider today is why should I even give thanks? Why should we? Here's another way of phrasing it. Why are we talking about gratitude and Thanksgiving? One, because it's that time of year, but why should we give thanks? Why is it important, Drew?
Yeah. I think it's really important. I have a lot of reasons that I like to give thanks. Not the least of which is right. Yeah, we just it's this interesting thing because there's a national holiday called Thanksgiving. Sort of like named for it. That sort of like implies, well, that's what you're supposed to do. I mean, yeah, you're supposed to also like eat turkey and watch football and maybe lament the changes and shifts in relationships and what colonialism did and all of these different things, right? It's an interesting day, but we call it Thanksgiving. And I don't know if you did, but I grew up with a little bit of practice of people taking some time at some point during Thanksgiving to share what you're grateful for. And so then I think it's this is such a fantastic question, right? Like why, right?
Mm.
Then there's kind of why on the holiday and making it specific that way, but there's also just like why is that a thing that we do or should do or not should do.
Yeah,
So I mean, I think that kind of
I
brings
think
up that question of what
yeah,
is
because
gratitude?
I think most of us know at some level, like, I know it's good to do that. Like, it's a kind of an obligation of like giving thanks is good, feeling gratitude is good. But it's not something that we regularly consider. Why should we do this? What's the importance of this? So I love that we actually have some space for us to consider this. Um, that's my favorite thing is like, let's go underneath the hood of this thing that we all take for granted. So what do you think, Drew? Why should we give thanks?
Yeah, I think there's a few different reasons, and or kind of like ways into this question. I think one, I just want to start with like this simple reality, like you said, right? Like it seems like already kind of baked in, but that's also like across different cultures and religions. There's like this posture of giving thanks, and so I think at its core, a lot of what that's about is kind of recognizing our uh, role in what we have
Mm,
in an honest way, which is to say that like not every I didn't have a hand in making, like if we just think like Thanksgiving, it's kind of easy. Like we went to with a big group of like 40 people and we had a hand in getting some of that food there, but we also only were like part of the way, right? Like some of the stuff we got had been put in cans by people and it had been grown before that and like processed and things, right? So in one sense, there's just like gratitude gives us sort of reorients us into our role and what we
and placement.
do like add in, but also that like we're not responsible for every piece and every step. That
Mm,
there's more to this, whatever it is, than just what I have put in or done myself.
I like that. Yeah, the it reorients us and puts us back in proper placement. Um, because I think without regular gratitude, Thanksgiving, um, maybe we can get like caught up in the illusion that how would you say it? Like we get out of the correct placement here. We start to maybe think that we are more of the whole rather than a part of the whole. But I like that it's a reminder of, like you said, we are not fully responsible for this, and it's a reminder that so much has been given to us. We didn't create this; that in many ways we were created, and so I love that. That's
And
why we
even
should get great. Yeah.
you think even beyond like the people, even like the other people responsible for the other processes, right? Like I can think of the technologies that were created to like change the way that farming and to like move to grocery stores, all of that kind of stuff, vehicles, the fact that I probably ordered my groceries on my phone, and like all of that little, so like the people, the technology, the ideas, the creation itself all around us, right? Like something grew,
Mm,
and plants that are older than you know I am, or maybe even older than our species, like had to exist and come forth and give seed and move through the seasons. Like so much goes into that. So it kind of resets us rather than thinking like I worked for this, I paid for this, that's all it, and it showed up and that's what happened. Or even like I cooked this thing, whatever. So it kind of gets us a little bit outside of ourselves. In that sense, it sort of puts us back in proper order, I would say, in some ways. Um, I think that other reasons to give thanks, then, not just to sort of, or I mean, tied to that, I guess, is like remembering that you're part of something, right? When you're grateful, remembering that sort of what you do have. Sometimes we all too often kind of start from this what we don't have, and so starting instead from what is here and acknowledging um, what's gone into it.
that's
So
good. It reminds me of a quote that I'll butcher of like, when you're focused on what you don't have, you'll never have enough. And when you're focused on what you do have, you'll always have more than enough. That's true. It kind of reorients us. Well, that is kind of starting to dip into my next question.
yeah, well, and even right
Um,
there,
yeah.
well, maybe go ahead and ask the next question because I've got
Well, I
something that
also
might.
want to quote, I can't remember who it is, but it's in the Charlie Brown Christmas special. Is it Lucy or Patty or but she starts complaining. She says, "All I want is what I deserve. All I want is what is coming to me." And that's often like our posture is like, all I want is what's coming to me. All I want, this food, I deserved it, I earned it, I made it, I whatever. And it's like, oh, let me
Yeah,
get reminded of something much larger here that I'm part of.
there's a
But
there's a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving special that we watched, and the whole deal is that Charlie Brown doesn't know how to cook, and so like he and Snoopy make like popcorn, and I don't even remember what else, but like that's Thanksgiving supper, and the friends, Peppermint Patty among them, but like all of them are just like, "Where's the turkey? you call this a dinner? What's going on? Like they're just like, the exact opposite of that. Because it's yeah, it's that mentality of like, this is what it's supposed to be. This is
Yeah.
what it should be. This is what I need. This is what I deserve. Um, Rather than being like, oh, there's something in front of me. I'm with my friends, right? Like it's a totally different vantage point.
Yeah. So, and that's getting into my next question. So we talked about why should we give thanks, and so we could come up with 1,000 reasons on why we should. There's been so much that's been given to us, even the breath that we have. We didn't create this. We didn't give ourselves breath or life. So that's why we could make an argument for why we should maybe give thanks. But what does giving thanks or gratitude, what does it actually do to us? Because sometimes the why should we give thanks, there's still a should in there. Like this is why you should, because let's remember you
Well,
didn't create all this.
I was gonna say,
Um,
I'll quote to you from it's called the Great Thanksgiving. There's a part of the liturgy, the communion liturgy at the
ooh.
table that's called the Great Thanksgiving. And part of it says, uh, sort of like let's give thanks to the Lord our God. And we say it is right to give our
Mm,
thanks and praise. And it is indeed right, our duty and our joy, that we should at all times and
mm.
in all places give thanks and praise to
Okay, I
you, oh
like
God. Right.
that.
So like there's like a part of me for me as a pastor and as a Christian, like there's part of it's what you do, right? Like
Mm,
it's right and salutary. It's our duty and our joy. It's part of the rhythm of life, right? So me not doing it gets me offset, and that's part of, I guess,
mm,
when I use those words like reorient or repositioning or giving me a posture, that's some of what it does then to me, right? So not being grateful gets me out of this rhythm of life that I think is beneficial and helpful and fruitful to me as a person of faith, in sort of all of my interactions. And so then to be grateful, sets me back in that, it sets
yeah.
me right in a sense, right? Like and I think that there's, in there too, right? There's a sense of, and it's certainly in the way that we frame the question of like should, right? Like I need to. And I would say like there is something from my vantage point, or something that I have experienced to be true, I guess, of um when I'm not doing that, I'm out of rhythm. I'm not right.
Mm,
And so there's a sense to look at it where you go like, well, is it right? Sort of like in this like ethereal way, or I go versus kind of I'm not right,
hmm.
if when I'm not doing this, right? Like and
Eh,
not like right or wrong kind of right, but like
okay.
something's off with me.
Yeah, okay, because in the right or wrong kind of way, sometimes I'm like, if like, who's telling me this is right? Who's telling
Sure.
me it's
Right.
wrong?
Yeah.
I guess I shouldn't, based on somebody's rule book. But when you're talking about the I'm not right, something is off in me. Because I love that you, in that liturgy, you said it is our duty and our joy. And I feel like the why should I give thanks? It's like it's our duty to, based on what's been given to us. But then the joy part also is just like it needs to be right there with it of like, you don't do this just out of duty, but because giving thanks and gratitude also does something to you inside. It sets you right. It For me, I think about I really like what you said of it's a reminder of often what we do have because my natural gaze starts to shift to what I don't have, what I want, what I'm working towards, what my goals are. Um, and and it's so easy for me always to be focused towards what am I trying to chase after and get to next, which always creates this gap between where I am and where I want to be. And instead to also regularly have times where I don't know, I guess I could say turn around and look behind me at like look at how much I've been given, look how much I have. And so I love that what it does to me. It reminds me of kind of these two mindsets of abundance or scarcity, of lack or of more than enough, that I can just in one moment, whether I'm in a posture of gratitude or not, I can step in and out of those places. So I love the duty and the joy there.
Yeah. Well, and so to kind of pick up from that, right? Like that sort of scarcity and abundance in terms of what does it do? Well, when I'm grateful, it makes me more generous. It
Mm,
helps me realize that it's not all about stuff. It helps me be sort of like happier, or at least more content in the sense of, because I'm focused on that I have, and that I have enough. It doesn't it takes me out of that cycle of there's never enough. I need the next thing. I've got to keep getting there. I'm less bitter when I'm grateful. So it's, those are all those parts of like it's not right. And then from the sense of kind of like vantage point or viewpoint, there's all sorts of stuff that I'm not sure that I'm completely bought into, in the sense of like when people talk about like manifesting something, like right,
Mm,
like you just like think about it, you expect it, and it will happen. But
yeah.
our expectations do in a lot of ways kind of shape our reality. They
Yeah.
keep us from seeing, if we're not expecting something, we may never see it, even if it sort of surprises us. And it's kind of one of those things of like, if I'm looking for a reason to complain, I'll find one.
Yeah.
I'll manufacture one, right? Like I will. I'll make up, mentally make up a reason to be grumpy and grouchy and cranky about something. If I'm doing the opposite, right? If I'm sort of like grateful and expecting to find things to be thankful for, if I'm in that sort of space and posture and viewpoint, I'll start seeing more sort of like gifts and things that I didn't deserve all around me, because they're right there. And so there is a sense in which kind of like what we are, our emotional outlook and framework and our kind of expectations do shape what we see and what we find, not in a sense of like creating something out of nothing, but like we'll find something that's not there, or we'll miss what is there, depending on how we're looking. And I just always think of one of my first continuing education events as a pastor. We had a guy who's a relationship counselor, and he was sharing this kind of general thing, and he just called it your like general emotional outlook. And he was saying that in therapy
Mm,
they kind of use this, but it's like if a couple is sort of like has had a lot of bad stuff going on, and they're really anxious, and they're kind of like not really trusting each other, and things are just kind of bad, they're not grateful, you're kind of like the far extreme of the opposite of that, right? Like they're always at each other. Then it's like, well, one partner is coming home late from work, and so what's actually happening is they're running a little bit late, they get caught in traffic, and their phone's in the back of the car, like not with them, and they don't, it's not linked to the car or whatever, right? So, or it's out of battery, something like that, right? So they can't get in touch with them, and they're running late, and they're not there. If you're in that space of the extreme negative outlook, you're like, what are they doing? Who are they with? Why aren't
mm,
they with me? What's going on? Right? Like you're sort of making
yeah.
all of these like extreme negative assumptions, right? And versus, if you have kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, a really positive emotional outlook, you're like, this isn't like them. I'm so worried, right? Instead of like, this isn't like them, right? It's like, oh, this isn't like them. What's going on? I hope they're
Yeah.
okay. Um, and then in the middle, it's like, man, I wish they'd answer my calls, right? Like, so like, because there's like the real objective stuff that's happening, but depending on what your sort of like resting emotional outlook looks like, depending on if you're in that sort of scarcity or abundance mindset, if you're in a positive emotional framework or a negative one, you're going to experience what's happening in a very different way. Like I said, even with the same phrase, right? Like this isn't like them. There that can be like a, oh my gosh, what's wrong isn't like them, or there can be like a what's wrong. This isn't,
Yeah.
and so one thing gratitude does, I think, it shifts us to that sort of positive emotional outlook. Um,
Yeah, it reminds me sometimes in psychology called priming, which is what is your mind
mhm.
primed for? So, I mean, just like, you buy a new car, you start to see it everywhere on the road. You learn a new word, you start to hear it more. It's whatever we're primed for. So, kind of like you were saying, in the like, maybe we can't manifest things out of nothing with thinking about it. But often, so much is around us that we are filtering and choosing what we see or focus on, or how we interpret life, and what we're primed for, and what we, I think in many ways, so much of our spiritual traditions are come from these practical things that are useful and helpful for us to experience more love and joy and peace. And so in a psychological way, our spiritual traditions, like with giving thanks, they help prime us to be able to notice and spot and interpret life in a way that's going to help us give more joy, more connection, more peace. So I love that. Often I'm looking for what's the practical use, what's the practical, like, what about this part of the spiritual tradition is actually practically beneficial to me. It's like, man, giving thanks primes me to be able to interact and receive life, and spot the things in life that will help um, create more joy and peace and a feeling of abundance and connection, which that's totally something that giving thanks does to me, is help me feel connected,
Hmm.
even to other people. Like you're saying with the example of food, I now feel connected to farmers, truck drivers, grocery store baggers, like I used to be. It makes me feel connected to those people. It makes me feel connected to my friends or family who helped me make the meal. But it also makes me feel connected to something larger that enabled all of this to happen. So that's something that giving thanks does for me, is um, helps me feel shift from this place of maybe not loneliness, but a place of like disconnection and isolation and kind of extreme individuality, to a place of connection. I kind of wrapped up in something much larger than myself.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then I thought of one other really kind of like practical thing that supposedly gratitude does. I don't know how much research has been done on this, but I know I've read a couple things lately of like even
Ooh,
just
I'm
like
excited.
gratitude journaling at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right? Like writing down what you're grateful for, like a very practical, like this is what I will do. I will think about my day and write down my things. Like people go to sleep faster and sleep better.
Oh,
Like the and and so just kind of like
I
like
believe that.
that to me, that kind of stuff's always fascinating to me, and I'm totally underinformed, right? And so I'm always looking for sort of like the research when people are doing whether it's like sleep studies or whatever, right? But where it's like, oh yeah, we imaged somebody's brain while they were in a deep meditative state, and this is
Yeah.
what like meditation actually does, right? That stuff is fascinating. So it's fascinating for me when it's like, okay, well, we had a group of people, start a new practice of gratitude journaling. We found some people that already were doing this, and then we had a group of people that weren't. And here's sort of some of the different things that just like that are very actually measurable,
Yeah.
not even just stories. So that
It's
stuff's
always
just
like it's always an fMRI tells us like what is
right.
actually, and I mean, in many ways, that's probably the number one thing that's led me back to spiritual traditions and to wanting to be rooted in the Christian tradition again, was just constantly finding, like, wanting to optimize my life, to experience more of the life that I wanted to experience, and finding in all of these ways, like, well, let me try meditation, let me try this, let me try that, let me read the best in positive psychology or latest research, and so much of it is validating what people have been doing for thousands of years, that they, whether intuitively or communally, have arrived on. And it's like, yeah, this is what we've been doing for thousands of years because it's good for us. It orients us in the right way in our world.
Yeah, well, and that's again that perspective to me that shifts and moves, and I think there's maybe a little bit of both and in the sense of, it's right to give thanks. Um,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's exactly that, right? Like, well, it seems like it's like actually putting me in alignment with the things that are healthiest for me, and and all of
yeah,
this kind of stuff. And also maybe there's like a reason then that it's sort of like kind of like right, whether that's in right alignment or sort of like this is the right thing kind of right.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, if it does this to me, there's probably a greater reason why I am designed this way,
Hmm.
and have these benefits. So I love. Okay, here's an interesting question. I think it's interesting. It might not go anywhere because it's kind of a funky question. But I got this question from the historian Diana Butler Bass. She's a Christian historian on Christian history, and she asked this question of, where does gratitude come from? I think that's an interesting question, of not just why should we have gratitude, or what might it do to us. Another question I have is of, where do we direct our gratitude? Where do we direct our
Mm.
things to, or what do we give it to? But she also has this question of, where does it come from?
Yeah, so those kind of questions of like from and two, right? Like, where's it?
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know. I think it is a fascinating question. I have like a theological perspective
Mm,
that I sort of subscribe to, and certainly from the from and the to. But let me kind of let's just sit with it for a minute before I share that.
mm,
Kind of get out of my own framework. Where does it come from? Yeah, right. Like, I don't know. I mean, I think there's probably some sort of there's often like a nurture component of that, right? So, like, is it a we wonder, is it a learned behavior?
mm.
Um, is it, like, my parents made me do it at Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah,
Like, this is
because
like
there
how I,
can
you know what I
be.
mean? Like, like the practice kind of came up. But there's something that does seem maybe more kind of like nature, or because of that sort of
Mm,
consistency across time and space, and that like gratitude is a thing that we do. We build a structure to remember and
mm,
mark something, great, or that we are grateful for. We name a holiday Thanksgiving. Yeah, there's something going on back there that you do wonder, sort of like, where is it from? Is it just sort of part of what it means to kind of have consciousness? Is
mm,
it something that develops from our relationships? Right? You talked about how like gratitude often, reconnects us to one another,
mm,
to creation, to God. So is it out of then those relationships that gratitude is implanted? And then certainly, I think, kind of from my perspective, as a pastor and a Christian, it was like human beings being created in the image of God. Like, that's where I would root this sort of gratitude, of like, God seems to be one who sort of like gives and is constantly giving and receiving. There's this fancy word called perichoresis, about the Trinity, and it's the sort of interweaving dance between the three persons of the Trinity that are sort of constantly in flow of giving and receiving.
mm,
And we'd imagine kind of gratitude would be part of that, right? Like, freely giving, freely receiving, and giving thanks for that and its very existence, kind of. And so then that perhaps, we are created in the image of that God, and so when we're participating in that giving and receiving and gratitude, it's, we're in alignment with that most basic piece that all of humanity has, bearing God's image.
mm, yeah.
That's maybe my kind of from answer generally.
Yeah, because, um, something that's coming to my mind, I don't know if this is interesting, but, like, if you're given a present, um, like, we're going into the gift giving season. Sometimes I'm given a gift and I'm like, "Oh, thank you." Like, I didn't really want this. I don't know why. I don't, but there's just kind of this obligatory, like, thanks. There's other times where somebody gives something to, maybe it's words, maybe it's a gift, maybe it's a gesture, an act of service or something. And it's just like, I'm, moved to tears. So grateful that it spills out of my eyes. And so it's interesting, like, where in us gratitude, like, sometimes things hit our gratitude fountain, and other times it's like, where does this come from? What is, another way of asking might be like, gratitude is a response to what? Like, what is it a response
Yeah.
to? And we played around with some of those ideas. Like, sometimes it's a response to reminding ourselves what we've been given, how much we have. But it is interesting to me. I don't have an answer there, but it's interesting that sometimes somebody gives something and it kind of just results in a thud in my heart, and other times it's wow, it springs forth with gratitude.
Yeah, well, and I do think that it, another perspective, certainly another kind of theological perspective, would be that it's part of our a response to a gift,
Mm,
right? And so, sort of from a theological Christian perspective, would be like, the gift is grace, right? Which just means sort
mm,
of like free gift. And so, part of then the sort of natural free flowing response to that kind of gift is gratitude, right? Is giving thanks, and praise. It's just part of what happens. Or, attached to that also, like, serving our neighbor is just like the thing that happens in response to that. So
Mm,
yeah, I mean, I think that that's a great way to sort of frame that, and for us to kind of carry with us, right? Is not just kind of where does this come from, but sort of what is this in response to?
mm.
Um, and I mean, I'm right there with you on gifts, right? That like sometimes they hit and kind of strike a chord, or I think too of like that interplay of what's the cliche, it's the thought that counts kind of thing, but also um sometimes sometimes that rings like absolutely 100% true, and then sometimes you're like, is it?
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and I
If
wonder
the
where
thought that counts,
like
then what
gratitude
will
plays
you.
into it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
But it's like, because I mean, because sometimes it's like it's the thought that counts, and it's like, yeah, but like I got you tickets to your favorite band, and you got me a cookie or whatever, right? Like, I think about, man. Did you watch New Girl?
Yeah,
One
yeah.
of the I got like you gave me cookie, I got you cookie, but it's like it didn't connect in the right way between Nick and Schmidt, and he's just like Nick is just like over it. He's like, I don't even know you anymore. Uh, uh, and but it's like, yeah, so like, what is it? Because it's not necessarily like just the gift. It's not always seemingly just the thought. Like, what is it? And that sort of strikes that kind of. And I mean, maybe those are extreme cases too, when we're sort of overwhelmed by gratitude, where it's almost like forced upon us, or like you said, it's either
Yeah.
forced upon us or it's wells up from within us. And I guess maybe that's the question, right? Is which? You know
Yeah,
me, I'm
yeah.
like, maybe it's both. Maybe it
Maybe
depends. But
for sure, for sure. I, you know, this, speaking of the Christian kind of perspective on gratitude and it being a response to grace and a free gift, I remember often growing up, hearing about what Jesus had done to me and the way that I interpreted that, and him dying on the cross. And it's like, and in response, we should be so grateful that we now want to serve him with our, 24/7. I want to serve him all the time because I'm so grateful for it. And I remember feeling like, I guess I'm supposed to feel that way. But like somebody thousands of years ago decided to die. And it's like, dude, I didn't ask you to do it.
I
But
can't.
the
That's what I was
story
gonna say.
about,
I was like, I know I'm sure there are more. There's more than one comedian, but there's something that's like, like I didn't ask him to, right? Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm supposed to be grateful? Like, I didn't.
I know, and it was like not only like I mean, it would deserve the thank you card for sure. But like you're now asking me to like lay everything down in sacrificial service to somebody who I'm like,
Yeah,
I didn't want you to, you didn't have to get on the train tracks, and now I need to. And so there was a version of salvation and the a way of seeing the crucifixion that didn't land for me. It was a gift that was kind of a thud. That was like, ooh, this is like a white elephant great gift salvation, Jesus. Like I didn't want it. I'm gonna try to re-gift it now, which I guess was my version
yeah.
of
Or
evangelism of
like,
like,
or man, it seems like there's a lot of strings attached to this now.
yeah,
Or now
yeah,
I'm guilty for not feeling this certain
yes,
way that I don't think I have. Like like I can't necessarily manufacture a feeling 100% of the
that's what it was.
time.
It was like I need
So
to
then, am I
manufacture
wrong?
this.
Yeah.
And then evangelism for me coming from that place was basically like trying to re-gift a white elephant gift of like, I didn't want this, but I think you're supposed to need it now too. So
Yeah.
that's what my re-gifting looked like with my evangelism. But yeah, but so I think that was an interesting version for me growing up, was like trying to manufacture, like you said, a feeling of gratitude. Like I guess I'm supposed I felt guilty for not feeling gratitude.
Yeah, or I mean, again, it maybe I would say part of what that the questions that come from that for me, right, are like, if that's the response, like what's going on? Do we misunderstand the nature of this gift?
Yeah.
Um, what is it about this gift that sort of like ought to inspire gratitude, and what's going on, not in like a judgmental way, that it doesn't, right? Or what, I would say I've been on the opposite extreme of sort of that sort of like evangelism instinct of like is this really a gift that I should share? Right? Like, or like kind of like why would I want to? Right. So similar kind of mindset, but maybe even from a different, but just like, yeah. So like that to me is just draws me into more questions
Yeah.
of like, what's going on here? What's the nature of this gift? What's going on with gratitude? Is it the only and always response?
Mm.
Um, I immediately am thinking about like Peter and like like Jesus, you can't do this thing, right? Like Jesus comes, whether he tells him he's going to go die on the cross, or whether he says you can't wash my feet, right? And all this like uh misunderstanding, or the way what gets in the way of what's going on in the gift there, right? Like, and it just brings me deeper into more questions about what exactly is going on, what exactly is the right response, what does gratitude look like in those situations, what is it like, what does it mean to be grateful when you're not like, where like, is it only a feeling, is it a practice
Oh,
too, like,
yeah.
I mean, and I think that's what's interesting about that study about like
That's a good
gratitude
one.
journaling is like, you don't have to feel grateful to write down something that you like should be grateful for or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So like, like what are, how much of this is practice, how much of this is feeling, how much of it is just kind of is posture, what comes first and motivates. I mean, that's that kind of origin question of the from. So I don't know, I've just had more questions now about
I
gratitude.
love it. Well, let me spend some time considering that one because that's a really good one of, is gratitude a feeling or is it only a feeling? Because I think we all have a feeling that we'd associate with that word of times where we've
Facebook at
felt,
least lets me select it, right? Like Drew Ingram
I'm
is
feeling
feeling
grateful.
grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. So we know the feeling, that really great gift somebody gave us, that that time they said something to us that was, we were so grateful that they spoke those words to us. Um, we all know the feeling, but is it more than a feeling? Does gratitude, is it always synonymous or equated with a feeling? That's a really good one because I totally know times, like you said, kind of in that gratitude journal way, where it's like, you know what? I'm not bubbling up with feelings of gratefulness right now, but I want to remind myself that I am grateful for this, this, and this. And it does seem to exist apart from just the feeling. That is interesting.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Or,
It's a good
and
reminder.
again, it's that way of like, yeah. I mean, like I similarly like to write thank you notes, and sometimes I'm not, but it's like I'm just gonna find somebody and a reason to write a thank you note, right?
Mm,
Like,
yeah.
but it's going to include, right, gratitude. And so um yeah, sometimes it's like, oh yeah, like you said, right, like, oh yeah, I know I'm like supposed to write these thank you notes, or I want to respond with a thank you, right, in different times. And then sometimes I'm just like, I'm gonna write a thank you note, like I'm going to say thank you, to be grateful for a particular person, reason, occasion, whatever it is. Um, and uh, and is it, I mean, I think we have the similar conversations probably about love, right? Like, is,
Yeah.
how much is the emotional aspect of love kind of like necessary? What is it, what does it look like? What is it really, does it just mean that the emotion, when you're not feeling it in the same way, is still like there? What's going on? So I
Yeah.
wonder some of those same things about gratitude, or
And
being
it makes me think about, yeah, things like love, gratitude, how much there's the feeling, which is part of it, but there's also like the action.
Mhm.
And how sometimes one leads to the other, or it has to go the other way around. The action leads to the feeling. Same way, like when we're happy, our muscles right here contract and we smile. But then we can also smile when we're not happy, which then starts to trigger feelings in
Like
our
kids
body.
in a school picture.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I meant in the real way where you can frown and your body will actually start to feel sad. You can
Mhm.
smile, or you can power pose, and like,
Right.
so sometimes the feeling leads to this. Other times you do this and it leads to the feeling. So sometimes we have to write the gratitude letter,
Yeah.
as a practice, as an action, which then starts to stir up and stoke the
Yeah.
the feeling. And so that's interesting
Well,
how it's got both components.
sometime we'll have to go back to, I was gonna say, because now I just want to go back to the what does gratitude do, and
Mm.
reframe it in this way that we're talking about right now, right? So like, what does gratitude do? What does it do, like, to me slash for me or whatever? It's like, but what is, like, when I'm grateful, what do I do? Like, what is it?
Oh,
What does
yeah.
gratitude inspire in me? What are the actions that gratitude takes, right?
Okay.
Um,
Well, okay, let's consider that. What does gratitude do through me? What does it lead me to do? That is interesting because again, I could go back to a bit kind of the big umbrella for me is it often leads me to connect in some way.
mhm,
Connect with God, connect with neighbor, friend, family, um, even connect with maybe it's not even a person, but connect with the food I'm eating, connect with the place that I get to work today. I'm grateful for this space. Grateful for the work I get to do, and now I'm led into deeper connection and relationship with the work. So I would say that's probably
yeah.
the first thing that stirs up in me is it leads me to deeper connection.
Yeah, I think too, right? And I think this is just kind of spinning out from some of that. It's like it might make me reach out. It might make me give somebody a phone call or a text
Yeah.
or write them a card, right? It might, which is ways that we connect or things. It might uh, like inspire me to do something for someone, right? Even on like super basic levels of like, um, I might be I might be more intentional about my thank yous to the, cashier at a store.
Yeah.
Um, I might like pick litter up off the ground, right? Like they're like, so it gets us out of ourself. It maybe brings us to connection, or I'm thinking even to
Yeah.
like might inspire me a little bit to service, and not even just for the people or things that like that the gratitude might first be aimed at, right?
Yeah, so good. And then, like we were saying, the feeling of gratitude might lead us to do those things. But then also sometimes doing those things stirs up the feeling of gratitude. So sometimes it's,
Yeah.
you know what, I'm not feeling the but let me write the letter. Let me say thank you to the cashier. And then gosh darn it, if you're not walking away from that HEB with more feelings of gratitude in you because you did the action, because you did the practice.
Right.
So yeah, I love it. Okay,
For sure.
I think the last question we have time for is on the other end of that, from and to. So where does gratitude come from? But then also, what are we giving thanks to? Who are we giving thanks to? Is there, as a Christian, is there some direction that our gratitude should be flowing? What or who are we thankful to?
Yeah. Well, I think that I could start really basic and simple and be like, well, when, my friend gives me a present, I am grateful to that friend. And like, right? Like, so like there's I think like some like micro in that exchange. I think like we've talked about with meals or things, right? My gratitude might be directed to people I know, to people I don't know. It might be directed both to people that sort of like helped get it here, and also to like circumstances,
Mm,
um,
yeah.
or even to sort of like the earth and creation. I think that yeah, that so often it's sort of directed to whatever like is the object or the subject of our gratitude.
Hmm.
I think that at least in some ways, that's sort of like the direction. So I guess in that sense of like, if it comes from gift, or like having received, then it might move towards the giver of the gift in that sense. um I think that then in that sort of larger sense, and to pick up from what you so beautifully kind of related as kind of connection, right, in the ways that gratitude brings us into connection, I think that um all of those things, like it's like realize gratitude helps us realize those connections, and so then the sort of the direction of that gratitude goes to um kind of all of it in a sense. And so then for me as a person of faith, that's it's toward God, but it's that reminder that God is kind of all in all, that God is in and through all of it. God's in the people that I'm grateful for, who bear God's image. God is in God's handiwork in the more than human creation all around me. And so giving thanks to God and giving thanks to my neighbor, and giving thanks to what God has created are not necessarily like three separate directions I can
Mm,
turn.
yeah.
And I love the way that you've talked about how gratitude can help us even realize that those aren't three separate directions, but
Mm.
that they're interwoven and connected.
Yeah, so good. I mean, yeah, I feel like the food is such a good analogy with all of this, because there's the food is the object we're grateful for. There's the people involved, and there's the known people and circumstances involved, and then there's so many more millions of things. And often for me, that just kind of leads me back to how I relate to God. Is like I can be thankful for the people who made it. I can be thankful for the people who grew it and drove it to me and sold it to me, and all the parts that I know of. But I know there's a million more factors and forces and everything that led to this moment and this meal, and it leads me so much more beyond everything that I know and can name, and it leads me beyond. And for me, the beyond is the God that I want to relate to and connect to, and I'm grateful for. So I that's for me is any of these things you start digging deep enough, and it kind of leads you so far into it that it leads beyond it. And for me, that's where I surrendered to the great mystery to God Himself. And yeah, so that's I think gratitude ultimately leads me there right now.
Mhm. Yeah, that's I love it. Wonderfully said, Brandon. And I'm grateful for our conversation and time today, and for the episodes of this show that we've been able to do, and the people who have been along on the journey with us. Um, it's been fun, and we're looking forward to more, even as we kind of navigate through some of the shifts and changes in our life, and in what we'd like to see from the show. So thanks everybody for being with us. Here's the little plugs that I didn't give directly because I don't know exactly when our next episode's going to be. Who knows? Like we might decide to do one next week,
Yeah.
or it might be like a month. The Go to the Facebook page, facebook.com/all questions considered. And you can certainly leave questions and comments to this video as it stays there, but also there's a pinned Google Forms link where you can ask a question, and you can kind of do so anonymously there if you'd like to. And we love considering your questions. Sometimes they're topics for shows, or sometimes they align with our own topics. And then we'll be looking for new ways into the new year to keep considering questions, to ask some more people to consider alongside us, and go on from there.
I love it. Thankful for you, Drew.
Yeah. And for you, Brandon. Let's we'll give one more sign off here. And what should we tell the people to do?
Ask a
Ask a
great,
good
ask a
question.
good question. Ask a good question. I'm never going to
Ask
get
a
that
good
right.
question. We'll see you.